I'm a 21-year-old freelance video editor and I get paid per project, meaning the faster that I edit, I literally make more. So in this video, I want to share how I edit 10 times faster without sacrificing quality for my clients. So I originally made this workflow back in 2022. And it was when I had my first 10K month. I was working with a channel. They had around 20 million subscribers at the time. They got about 40 million after I worked with them. And they were expecting editors to get 2 videos done per week. I managed to get 6 to 10 videos done per week because of my workflow and the automations that I set up. So welcome to the video editing SOP. By the way, this is the same one that I give to editors that I train, whether it be on my team, whether it be under the clients that I'm helping, or just within the coaching program. Basically get them to follow this for every single YouTube video. Step 1 of this editing workflow is we need to download the footage, but we're also going to scrub through so that nothing catches you off guard later. There is nothing worse than you color grading a piece of footage and then midway through editing you realize the sun is slowly rising or setting, and now the color grade doesn't make sense and you got to do this weird thing where you keyframe the color. So that can happen, but if you just quickly give it a scrub, you'll realize it beforehand. Or let's say the format of the recording changes. It goes from that landscape to horizontal for some reason. Catching that beforehand allows you to set up the project properly. So I always tell people, check the footage, just quickly spend 30 seconds reading through it or watching through it, sorry. Next, we're going to create a project file within Premiere Pro, whatever, and we're going to call it the ID of the project and then the title of the project. I always use this naming convention where if you have a project tracker on something like Notion, or if you're on a larger team, for example, when I had that huge channel, they were pumping out like 10, 20 uploads a day. So we had to use IDs like, project 312, project 380, things like that. Like right now with this video that I'm recording within my YouTube workflow, we have an ID for this video. So the editor is going to be using that ID. And then we put the title as well. That way we can, on a quick glance, know what that video is about. The reason we use IDs is because sometimes the title of a video can change. For example, the title of this video, you could read it on YouTube. It was probably different to what we named that video on the back end when we were scripting it or coming up with the idea. Having the video ID makes sure that no matter who's looking at the video has it consistently named in the same way. The next step, once you've created the project file, is we're going to import all the footage and the audio into a timeline, set the correct sequence settings, and rename the sequence to ID assembly. Now there's 3 parts to that, so let me go through them one at a time. First of all, I'm just going to draw up Premiere Pro because I can't be bothered bringing it up. Let's say this is your bin, so essentially all your files. This is your timeline. This is your preview. So I'm just going to put a video sign here. You're going to take all your audio and video files from here and bring them into your timeline now before you've actually edited any of it. This is especially important if you have multicam footage or just a ton of different video clips and audio. We want to have full context of everything before we start working on it. So we're going to put the main piece of footage first, set the sequence settings based on that main piece of footage, and then add all the pieces of audio and sync as necessary. We're also going to rename the sequence that's automatically created to the ID and then assembly. The reason we do this, in fact, you'll find that out in a later step. But it's important we rename the sequence that was created to the project ID and then assembly. Just like that. Because what we're going to do is assemble the project by syncing all the footage and audio perfectly. It is worth spending the 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20, 30 minutes just syncing everything correctly, especially if you've got a lot of pieces of footage. Because the hardest thing to do is fix unsynced footage, even by a frame or 2, after you've ended up cutting it. I did it one time where I synced all the footage, or so I thought. I cut up the video, and because it was a reaction video with multiple layers, it was really hard to fix when I found out I didn't sync the audio correctly. So that's why I wrote it out in this workflow. I check it every time. Next, you want to center the footage through a transform effect in the source effect. So what you'll realize is inside your effect controls, you'll have 2 types of effects. You have the clip effects, which everyone is used to. When you drag on the clip, it goes to your clip effects. But a little unknown trick is to click source effects in the effects tab. Now what this does is, if you click on it, by the way, in Premiere Pro, it'll be completely blank because it looks like it's a buggy part of your UI. But what actually happens is if you drag in a transform effect into that source section, the transform effect applies not just to that clip, but anywhere where that clip occurs. For example, let's say on your timeline, you have footage that is cut up like this. If you just add a transform onto this clip, the transform will apply to this clip. But if we click on this clip and then we go to the source effects, what ends up happening is by adding it to this one clip, it adds it to all of these clips automatically. And the best part about this is, let's say you realize that, wait, this clip wasn't centered properly. You can just change one of the transforms and it would apply it to all of them. So I always center my footage through the source effects, not clip effects. Next, I'm going to do a very basic color correction, just to color correct the skin tones. So for example, sometimes some cameras make people's skin look too yellowish. Sometimes it looks too reddish. Sometimes it looks a bit green tinted, magenta tinted, etc. We just want to color correct so it hits that the skin tones. Something interesting that I actually never knew until I learned color correction. Whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, whether you're whatever race, we actually all have the same skin like base color, the same hue. The only difference is basically how bright it is within that color. This sounds obvious, like, oh, there's a difference in brightness. But it's like, when you look at two different people of different races, it looks like a different color, but technically it's not. So you'll see in like your lumetri scopes, like these will be all the colors. What you'll realize is everyone's skin tone lays across the same line because the only difference is through a color. So let's say the skin tones in your video right now are like here. No matter what their race is, you basically need to bring it and just slightly curve it so that it matches this line. Essentially like that. I accidentally moved one of those little lines, but what you're going to do is color correct just to bring it onto line with that. That wasn't supposed to move, you get the point. So that way, you know you've got your skin tones correct. And then some simple things like color temperature, making sure your exposure, your highlights, your shadows, your whites, your blacks, etc. are color corrected properly. That I want to get done first time round. And once again, I am doing that on the source effects, not the clip effects, because what that means is I'm going to be able to change it on one clip and it'll automatically be done for the rest. Something, in fact, before we move on, something important. Right now, we are correcting the color, not grading. Correction is when you bring the footage to its normal state. Grading is when you change the color for a specific effect or emotion. For example, you correcting the footage is making sure that it's not too warm, it's not too cool, as in the Kelvin value, and you're making sure that just in general, like, it looks like it was taken in normal circumstances. The grading is where you specifically decide, oh, I'd like it to have a orange and teal vibe. I want it to have like a warm vibe. I want it to look like kind of misty. Like, that's where the grading comes in, but it's important you correct first, and grading comes right at the end of the workflow. Next, we want to adjust the gain and use a compressor to set the audio so it peaks around -3 to -6. What you'll realize is there's a lot of steps of just fixing the footage, because these things can make or break your video, and it's how you can tell a good editor from a great one. It's how well do they do this. And if you want to get faster at editing, a lot of the times the best way to get faster is just make sure you don't do stupid mistakes that future you has to spend 30 minutes solving. So this is how we get around that. It's sort of like editing revisions. By you checking a video, it might take you an hour, but by you leaving in a mistake, you think you've saved 5 minutes, but in reality, you've cost yourself an entire day because you had to block that day out for revisions, and now the video took a whole day longer. It's like an hour of checks saves a day of revisions. In the same way, an hour of assembling the project saves hours, probably like days, of fixing mistakes down the line. So with audio, all I'm trying to do is adjust the gain. So it's between -3 and -6 on my audio levels. So you'll see like 6 -3. And you want, when the loudest parts of the audio are happening, you want them around this stage. Now, the reason I mentioned compressor is some people's audio will have the low parts way too low and the high parts way too high, and it changes way too much, which can mean for the viewer, it feels kind of ear vapey. Like they set it at a certain volume and sometimes it's blasting their ears, and sometimes they feel like they need to put the volume higher. So you'd never want that, and what a compressor does, it literally compresses those sections together. So instead of it being like this and this, it would kind of even them out, like this and this. That way, a viewer can have it at this audio and it sounds fine, compared to them having to set it here, and now this one's too loud, but if they set it here, now their volume's too quiet. So in order for the viewer experience to be as good as possible, we use a compressor to get the dynamic range of the audio in a nice range. Next, we're going to set a hard limiter for our audio at -1 decibels. A lot of people say to do it at 0. I found that when you set it to 0, by the time that the audio is peaking, so you know when, if you've ever seen like those ear rape compilations or those ear rape memes where it just puts it so loud that it actually like maxes out the audio level meter, that's called peaking essentially, and a hard limiter where you set it in your audio track. What this does is it makes sure if there ever is a time where it hits 0 or -1, it'll automatically just bring that part of the audio down. So this prevents ear rape. Next, once I've got the audio leveled out, just like this, I want to use audio enhancers. Unless the creator has a really good mic and they have an amazing recording situation, there's going to be times that you need to fix the audio. This isn't sound effects, it's just fixing the audio. Some of the common ones that I like are, as mentioned there, denoise, de-reverb, de-esser, and parametric equalizer. I'll walk through quickly what these do. I'm not going to go super in depth, but denoise, if you ever hear like a subtle shh, either because of electronic equipment or like a constant train going by, which I don't think I've ever seen a train with infinite length, but you have like a constant like noise, then you can take that out. It's a balance between having it high enough to remove the noise, but having it small enough so that it doesn't impact the actual audio. So there's no specific number here, it depends on the audio. De-reverb is, especially if you have like a loud echoey room, de-reverb can help. Once again, you want it at a high enough percentage to remove the echo, but low enough that it doesn't hurt the actual recording as much. It's always a balance. De-esser is where those hissing sounds like sss, those can be really harsh in the viewer's ears. And it's a specific frequency that these S sounds happen. So what a de-esser does is it reduces the volume just for that specific frequency. So it still sounds normal, but it's less harsh on the ears. So that's what de-esser does. A parametric equalizer, it's a little too complex for the scope of this video, but what it can do is it can turn a bad mic, not to sound great, but a lot damn better. So it can make the voices sound a lot richer, especially if that sounds a bit tinny or thin, it can make it sound richer. So I like to fix the audio like this first, because once again, it's going to be a lot easier than trying to fix audio once you've already done the cut. Now, by this point, we've actually fully assembled the video. But before you go and cut, I want you to duplicate the sequence and you're going to rename it to the ID of the project, main. This is a workflow that I call the assembly workflow. And it was while I was, not an internship, but it was at a workshop at a creative agency that I learned this trick at. So I'm around 17 years old, and this creative agency, they're doing this event where young creatives, they go in and they can just learn. I was pretty young at the time. And there was this head editor who was sitting at his PC, and he was essentially showing a big project that he did for like a really big company. I think it was Channel 4. So in the UK, it's a big client for them. Now this guy had so much footage. I think it was like 50 or 60 hours, something ridiculous like that. And they had to bring it down to a 20-minute episode. Now here's the thing, my editor brain, because I was already working with clients at the time, is thinking, if you accidentally delete a piece of footage, how in the world do you bring it back? Like that must be the scariest feeling in the world. Like, dude, I've deleted that footage. I have to now sift through 40 hours of footage. Now to be clear, there's now AI tools and AI workflows that can fix that problem, but this is still a best practice. What he has is a separate sequence that he hasn't touched, that is just like all the usable footage. Now what that looks like is, it's not the full 40 hours, it's not the 20 minutes, but I believe it was around like 6 hours of all the usable footage that they could ever use. So there's all the random takes, the bad takes taken out, all the silences, all the bits where there's behind the scenes, he just took those out. And he has that as a separate sequence because if he needed, he can now find that a lot easier. Now the best part is, because me and you, we're working on social media content, YouTube videos, reels, things like that sort of content. For us, we might have realistically like an hour footage. Some videos, like IRL big videos, you might have 10, 20, 30, which it applies more to. But in general, a lot of clients you can get for like 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours of footage. So let's just say 1 hour footage. The usable footage might be, let's say 20 minutes. Now the thing is, once you've gotten it down at each of these stages, I want to have essentially like an archive if I ever want to go back. For example, we've assembled the project so far. So we've got the audio all right, we've made sure all this footage is synced. I don't want to lose that by cutting into the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the sequence, keep the old one called ID assembly, obviously that being the number. But the second one, which is going to be a carbon copy because we literally copy and pasted it, I'm just going to call it ID main. And that is going to be the main place that we're working on the video. So we're going to be doing our cuts. And if you can do this stage again, I call it final, but it's not technically the final because I'll do like V2, V3 as well for revisions. What this is going to do is like, this is going to be the cut up version. This was obviously the assembled uncut. This would be like basically the final video, like all the VFX, sound effects, music, etc. This is going to be like a duplication of this after me doing the revisions, because I always want to keep the OG version just in case I need to go back. But what this assembly workflow does is you never lose progress, which can be really scary and waste a lot of time. So that is why we assemble it, get it ready to cut, then duplicate and rename. Next, we're going to go through the rough cut stage. So I cut in 3 stages because it's the most effective that I found for time, quality of the cut, and storytelling. So the first stage of cutting is going to be the rough cut. The rough cut is where we simply remove all the silences and we cut the easy to spot mistakes. The fastest way to do the rough cut is by doing something that I call cutting to the waveform. The waveform is that squiggly line that is so iconic with audio. Cutting to the waveform means instead of you listening through every part of the video, you just kind of scrub through quickly without even watching it and just instantly identify where the silent sections are, cut those out. And if you notice something like, for example, if we have a waveform like this, we can easily tell, okay, this is silent, we can cut that out. These 3, they look very similar. And if I just play it for like half a second here, play it for half a second here, I now can tell these 3 are repeat takes. I can cut those out. This one's longer, so this is probably the main take. So within about 1 second, I can take all of this 30 seconds of footage out without actually needing to listen to it. So do you see how cutting to the waveform, if you've got like an hour-long footage, you can literally cut an hour-long footage down in about 10 minutes in terms of doing the actual rough cut by cutting to the waveform. The second stage, so now we've cut out all the silences and easy to spot mistakes, is we're going to move on to the fine cut. The fine cut is getting pretty damn close to how the final cut is going to look. When we're doing our our rough cut, what you'll realize is there might be multiple takes of this exact same thing. Now, this doesn't mean we're leaving mistakes in, but it means that maybe the creator said the same thing twice or said a similar thing that serves the same purpose. For example, let's say I'm going to the shops and we're leaving for the shops now. These 2 aren't the exact same line, so you could keep them both in. But realistically, from a storytelling perspective, you're going to want to get rid of one of them. So the fine cut is where you decide which unnecessary lines you're going to keep out or keep in, depending on how you want to structure the video and what pacing you want. You're also going to start deciding on the timings for the cuts. So when I say timings, I mean like how many frames of pauses do you actually keep between this clip and this clip. Now here, we don't want to worry too much about anything crazy creative like J-cuts, things like that. But all we want to do is decide which clips stay in, which clips stay out. There may also be sections here where, let's say you have a few clips here, you realize that, wait, if I place this section here and then this section here, it's actually funnier, or it makes more sense, or it's more engaging, or the tension is held for longer, therefore this clip becomes funnier. All of these creative and storytelling decisions you can make during the fine cutting stage as well. So fine cutting, put simply, remove unnecessary takes, restructure in order to maximize the efficacy of your storytelling, and just start deciding on your timings for the cuts. So are you going to remove a few frames of pause here? Are you going to add a few frames of pause there, etc.? By the end of the fine cut, you should feel relatively happy about how the entire video plays out. The next and final stage of the cutting is, surprise, surprise, the final cut. And by the way, this technically doesn't say final cut. It's more like a quick trick that I tell every editor to do. While you're going through your fine cut, you're oftentimes going to be actually watching through the footage at this stage. So what you can do is just add markers as you're cutting. So let's say here you have a creative idea to add a dinosaur in the background. Just quickly add a marker and click M again. And what clicking M again will do is actually allow you to add a note to the marker. And you can just add a quick note for yourself that will remind you for the idea later, like add dinosaur. The reason this is so useful is oftentimes your best ideas will come when you don't need them. So just note them down. That way, when you're coming to your creative or more visual stages, you don't have to think of new ideas. You can just quickly implement the easy to implement ones, which you've already thought of. And then if you need more to add in later, then you can start thinking of what ideas to add in. Now we're on to the final cut. And this is where we finalize the exact timings for every cut. So by this stage, the video should be ready to upload. As in, not that it's good, but like it's a viewable video where all the lines make sense, the timings are decent, etc. The final cut is basically just watching back in normal speed, making sure that all the clip timings sound good. If there's an emotional section where, let's say, someone's saying a joke, and right before the joke punchline is given, you want to add a bit more pause just to create a bit of curiosity, a bit of suspense. You might notice that, realize you cut it too short, and just add a little bit more pause over here. It's going through and just fine-tuning those timings. This is going to be a checking stage. We mentioned it a little bit, but what you want to do is watch through the entire video in what I call viewer mode. Me and you are video editors. So what will happen is, because we've watched the video so many times, even if the video is a bit confusing, we'll still understand it. For example, if there's a line here and here, and there's a few more sections here, you might have cut it in a way where sections 1 and 2 don't actually make sense together. But if you had the context from clip 4, then it does make sense. Because you as an editor know what happened in clip 4 and your brain already has that context in mind, you don't recognize the problem with how clip 1 transitions to clip 2 from a story perspective. But if you watch the video from the beginning and you literally just sit from the beginning and you remove everything you've remembered about the video and you literally just watch it normal speed, you're not allowed to fast forward, you're not allowed to go back, you're not allowed to pause it, nothing. Just watch it and wait for the times that you either feel confused or overwhelmed. Because if you as the editor feel those negative emotions, guess what the viewer is going to feel? That, but 10 times worse. Which is why we watch it one time from start to finish, and if there's any time you're confused and you had to click the video back, realize that you got to fix that clip. Because while you have the luxury of just going back in the video, viewers don't often go back in the video when they're confused. They just click off, and that kills retention, which is why we check the video in viewer mode, so at normal speed, and we just make sure the video is good enough to be posted as is. This should be a fully, perfectly understandable video. Next, I'm typically gonna edit the intro at this stage. I used to edit the intro right at the end, but now, because of this cutting process that I found I have enough context to edit the intro as well as possible. I'm typically going to put a substantially greater effort into the intro, because this intro is basically going to drive my entire career. If you think about what grows you as an editor, it's going to be the previews that you can post. So when you cut up a video, you post it online on socials. It's going to be the video that you put on your portfolio. And just all in all, it's going to be the proof that you can show future clients that, hey, look how fucking sick I am. Now the thing is, when people think of a good editor and they're seeing a piece of your work, they're not thinking about the animation at 8 minutes and 23 seconds. Sorry, 8 minutes 30 seconds. They're not thinking about it. They're just looking at your intro and basing your entire credibility and skills based on that intro. If you watch a client go through your portfolio, you would be surprised, somewhat concerned at how little of it they actually look at. In fact, they just probably watch 2-3 seconds of each video on your portfolio. So it's so important when we're editing videos, we focus on the intro to optimize for 2 things. First of all, yes, the actual viewer's experience and making sure the video is just objectively good. Like, don't ruin the video by adding stupid effects when they shouldn't be there. But also making sure that you've actually got it up to your standards in a way where you would be proud to actually put that on your portfolio, because that's where it's going to be. Next, this is more specific for educational creators, but oftentimes they'll have like a lower third. If you don't know what this is, a lower third is, actually there's a screen, it's something that literally goes in the lower third. It might be there, it might be here, it might be like this, but it's put in the lower third of the screen. For example, a lot of my videos, we have like a lower third, which just shows some of the clients that I've worked with. Alex Hormozy, an entrepreneur, he does about 250 million plus a year in terms of dollars. He does this as a best practice as well. It just says the companies he's owned, his name, how much he makes, etc. So a lower third can be really useful if you're working with someone that wants to show proof. Not as important for entertainment creators, to be honest. Next, I'm going to be adding zooms throughout the video. I like to do zooms all in one go, where essentially I'm just going to do little zooms to keep the video engaging. If it's more of a faster paced / less mature audience, I'm going to be more exaggerated with my zooms. So I might literally be zooming from, let's say 100 is the base. I might be zooming all the way up to like 110, maybe even 115 from a single zoom. But what you'll realize, especially if you edit for more mature audiences, this can seem silly, exaggerated, just kiddish. So in those cases, I might be bouncing between 100, maybe 103, maybe like 105. 110 is like for something that's got to really be exaggerated. That's when I'm doing 110. Now the points at which you want to zoom, let's say this is an audio waveform. Quick tip for zooms. You want to do the zooms when the most important word in a sentence is said. And also you want to match the cut of the zoom with the peak in the waveform. For example, let's say this is the most important word in the sentence. You're going to zoom on this word, but you're not going to zoom just randomly on the word. You're going to zoom at the peak. So not when the word starts, not near the middle, not at the end, but on the peak. It's going to make your zooms hit so much harder. So I'm adding the zooms throughout the entire video. Next, adding B-roll animations throughout the video. This is probably where the majority of your time is going to go. If you're doing more animation heavy videos, that's completely fine. Add sound effects throughout the video while leveling them. So sound effects, I'm typically going to be doing them in 3 stages. You've got whooshes, where on every single movement, I'll do a whoosh. I'm not going to go too deep in this, but I will in the leveling section. You want to have functional, which just means if this was happening in real life, what sound would it make? If there's a fire on screen, you should probably put a fire sound effect. If you have a light that's being shown, like a light bulb, you should probably put like a flickering light bulb sound effect, or maybe like a electric hiss. Like, you know, that small like hissing sound, like a 50 hertz sound, that might work quite well with the bulb being on screen. So those are functional sounds. And finally, you have unique sound effects. These are sounds that don't really make sense when you think about what the sound effect is, but they just for some reason work in the video. I'll give you an example. I was editing a video once. It was more like a ambitious vibe, emotion trying to be put across. And there was some text on the screen. And I was just literally sliding this text on screen, like wiping it. So imagine there's no text on screen, you wipe this across and the text comes on. I put an eagle hawk sound effect here. Now the thing is, that makes zero sense in this context, but because of the emotion that was coming across and the movement was sort of like flying across, I was like, fuck, what if it works? So I tried it, used some audio modulators on it, and it worked. So I'm like, damn. Another example, this wasn't my edit, but someone else's. They were doing like a PS5 versus Xbox scene, and you had both consoles here. And it kind of looked like two things fighting. So the guy put a boxing ring, or I think it's called like a boxing bell, you know, like the ding, ding, ding. He put that sound where it doesn't really make sense because it's not a boxing ring, but it kind of works, you know? And this is how you come up with these more realistic, more deeper and richer sound design, where it actually feels like you're part of the video. Now, when it comes to leveling, very simple rule with audio on sound effects. With volume, you want the sound effects to be quiet enough where if you're not focusing on it, you cannot hear it. But you want it to be loud enough where if you are focusing on it, you can hear it. So if I'm trying to listen to your sound effects and I'm finding it hard to hear, like I'm actively trying to hear it and I can't hear it, then it's way too quiet. But if I'm like trying to ignore it and I'm just trying to watch the video and it's like there's a random fucking whoosh that comes out of nowhere and it's like distracting, that one's too loud. So you want it quiet enough that when you're not focusing on the sound effects, you can't hear it, you can barely hear it. And it's loud enough where if you're actively focusing on it, you can actually hear it and it's pretty clear. That's sort of sweet spot when it comes to sound effects volume. Another thing is relative sound effects volume. This is more important where let's say you've got two movements, like movement 1 and movement 2 in your keyframes, and you're adding a sound effect for 1 and 2. How loud these sound effects are relative to each other is extremely important. For example, if both the movements are the same in terms of how impactful they are, then the sound effect should be roughly the same volume. If you've got one movement, let's say the keyframe, just to exaggerate, looks like that, versus like this for the movement, this one should have a much bigger sound effect compared to this one. Because imagine they were swapped around. It would look and sound so silly. The way I like to describe this for editors that are learning this, I want you to get your hand and wave it by your ear. No idea if the mic will pick it up, but oops. No idea if you could hear that wave. If you couldn't, sounds a bit stupid or looks a bit stupid. But essentially, that's what a whoosh is, and that's about how loud you would expect it to be if your hand is fanning your ear. Now, compare a different whoosh. You're standing at a train station, the platform's about a meter away from you, and a train blasts by. Think about how loud that whoosh would be. Imagine the volumes of those two whooshes swapped. So this was as loud as a train, and the train was as loud as your hand fanning by your ear. It would sound stupid. So level your sound effects relative to each other so that they match the magnitude of the movement. Next, we want to just quickly go through the entire video and check all the sound effects volume levels. This is going to be an easy way for you to realize like, yo, these are a bit off. I'm gonna change the volume quickly by putting this up, putting this down. Kind of like how we check the cuts and the timings. We just wanna check all the volumes real quick. Next, I'm adding music throughout the entire video. Once again, while leveling. Music, I have the same rules as sound effects for volume. So it should be loud enough where if I'm focusing on it, I can hear it clearly. It should be quiet enough where if I'm not trying to focus on it, it's not getting in the way of either the voice or just genuinely it's not annoying. Now at certain times you can move it up, you can move the music down, you can put it lower, etc. This is called audio ducking, where let's say this is more like a montage section. This might be like a voiceover. This could be more like an emotional section. So it's completely fine and recommended to vary your music throughout. And in terms of switching music, I recommend every sort of like 30 to 90 seconds. But more realistically, I'm doing it every sort of 10 to 60 seconds. This just means that every single time there's an emotion change or a switch in the story, we have a new music to accommodate for that change. And if you're not changing it this frequently, you're either making one of two mistakes. Either you're just not changing the music when the emotion changes, which is going to feel really silly for the viewer. Like the music just won't match the emotion. They won't feel like they're part of the video. So you're either not changing on the emotion or you're not cutting out enough, because honestly, if the emotion or story isn't moving at least every 10 to 60 seconds, you're doing something wildly wrong. Like there should be something changing about the emotion or in the story about every that period of time. Next, we just want to check and adjust all the music volume. So I go through all the video, make sure that the music matches not only the main audio, but also relative to each other, they're the right volume. Now, next, we've got the final checks. So you want to check the entire video. It says here the final checks SOP, because that's what we give to our coaching students. It's a process to check the videos properly. We have hundreds of SOPs and processes and just documented things for people to follow within the editing layer. This is a YouTube video, so there's what you're getting. But essentially, we use a 4-stage checking process. If you're not checking your videos properly, holy crap, you're wasting so much time. Like this final checks SOP, it takes about 30 to 60 minutes to check the video thoroughly. If you tried checking it on your own, like in sort of a disorganized way, to get the same thoroughness of checking the video, it might take you 3-4 hours. But by doing it in a more like structured way in our 4-step system, we can do it in 30 to 60 minutes. Now, the thing is, this isn't your normal check. Like, oh, I just watched the video, make sure it's all right. Because even when you check your videos, you've probably found the client will still give you revisions. By using the final checks SOP, what it does is it minimizes both the number of raw revisions, meaning just how many notes they give, and also it minimizes the rounds. I remember this, it was a 11-minute video and there was like 280 something revisions on there. I'll never forget that. That was hell. It took longer to finish the revisions than it did to edit the video. Like the video took 2 days to edit, the revisions took 3 days because we had 2 revision rounds. It was hell. But by doing a proper check, you can save that time. What I like to say is an hour of checks saves you a day of revisions. So it's worth doing your checks properly. Once I've done all my checks, I'm going to export the full video. Pretty simple. Then I'm going to either upload it to Google Drive or to Frame.io. With the editors that we work with, it's part of process to use Frame.io in order to give revisions to them. But if you are working with a client that has not specified, trust me when I say, just send it through Google Drive. Because what happens is when you give it through Frame, you're basically asking for revisions. So why even prompt that if the first draft of the video is most likely fine, as long as you've checked it correctly. So I like to send it through Google Drive, and also when I'm naming the file, this is super important, never name it V1. Never do this. Always name it final at the end. So it'll be like ID, name, final. Because psychologically what this does is it tells the person, hey, there's no changes to be made. If you name it V1, you're basically subconsciously telling them that there should be revisions and there should be changes. Because if I tell you we're going to the park first, that insists that we're going somewhere after. If I tell you, oh, this is the first TV show that we're going to watch, that insists that we're going to watch more TV shows after that. So V1 begs the existence of a V2. V2 begs the existence of a V3. So what I always do is I literally just always name the video final. I'll still keep the old video, and in my own file explorer, I'll name it V1, V2, whatever. But when I'm sending it, I'm going to name it final because it prompts them to want to make it the final one. Next, if they have sent revisions, complete them back to front. So you want to read through all the revisions, and instead of completing it from the start to finish, you complete it back to front. Here's why. Let's say you have all these different notes throughout the video. And let's say this note is basically remove from 30 seconds to 45 seconds, like remove this clip. Once you remove this clip, what will happen is all of these notes will now no longer be aligned by 15 seconds. So they will be minus 15 seconds or plus, whatever it is. Now the problem with that is, let's say there's another revision to remove this section. Now it gets worse. And by the time you get to the last few revisions, or even a couple of revisions in, they don't line up with the timestamps anymore. But by completing revisions back to front, what happens is this revision, let's say it's a cut from here to here, that doesn't affect any of the other revisions. So I'm going to go backwards to front when completing revisions and just sending it through again. Then you're going to send it through, get it approved, and once it's approved, you export all your final deliverables and upload to Drive. A lot of editors, when they send in the video, they literally just send in the final video, which is crazy. But what you can do is you can essentially repackage this video to maximize the value that the client gets out of it, while it takes basically no work from you. So while the average editor that they've worked with in the past is just sending in the final video and saying, hope you liked it, when you repackage it in an efficient way, I'm not going to go through all of it today, but when you repackage it in an intelligent way, not like just creating shorts or stuff like that, because that takes stupid amount of time, that means that the creator gets the most amount of value from it. No other editor has ever done that for them, meaning you're way more valuable, they want to keep you, they want to pay you more, etc. So you want to upload those to Drive, send them through, and then finally, just message the team with a link to the entire folder with all the deliverables that you've given. So that is my entire editing workflow. It's the same one that I use to scale past 10K a month. We've helped hundreds of other editors scale as well. It's the same workflow we recommend for them. And if you are an editor who wants to scale, which I'm assuming you are by you watching these videos, go click here. It's the exact 4-step process that I use to scale myself to past 10K a month, but also many, many other editors. So go click that video here and I'll see you there.